In this video, we'll attempt to bust the urban myths that surround concrete roof tiles.
But people call it fungus.
Yeah.
Is it fungus?
No, they call it a patina, which is just like a growth.
Well, aren't you supposed to do it every,
Who told you that? It's an urban myth, is it?
Is it?
You believe urban myths.
Yeah, well then wouldn't my concrete, like if it's bare concrete, wouldn't the water seep through that?
Yes, this is one of the questions that we are often asked. When we go out and a homeowner is requesting a roof restoration, which means painting the roof. And concrete roof tiles are more often repainted than terracotta roof tiles for various reasons. So to make sense of these urban myths about concrete roof tiles, we need to go back to the basics. Now, when I went to school, there was always the misunderstanding between cement and concrete. And to this day, you will see a lot of people, even roofers, refer to concrete roof tiles as cement roof tiles. Now, there's a huge difference between cement and concrete. Cement is that grey powder that you get when you go and buy a bag of cement. And it's the cement that does all the work to produce concrete. So what is concrete? Well, concrete is the product of mixing cement with sand and aggregate, which is rocks, stones typically. So when you mix cement and sand and a few rocks, you get a hardened compound called concrete. So the finished product, the concrete roof tile, is a concrete roof tile, not a cement roof tile. So that is the difference between cement and concrete. Now the important thing is that nothing happens if you don't mix all this together. In other words, you're going to mix the cement with the sand and the aggregates. When they get mixed together, then something magical happens. The whole thing starts to harden and it turns into concrete. Now, simply put, a chemical reaction happens when you have cement, sand, aggregate, and you add water. Because once you add water, then the action starts. Everything turns into a sloppy mix, but very soon it starts to get hard. And it's the cement and the water starting to do its magic. Now, what happens over time is that the cement and the water starts a chemical reaction and it grows new compounds that fills all the little gaps between the sand and the aggregate. And the whole thing starts to harden and stiffen up. It's much like us human beings. When we are born, it's all a sloppy mix. And as we get older, it all hardens up. And much like us human beings, we get stronger as we grow older. And some of you may say that as age goes on, when we get to late 20s or the 30s, we are at our strongest. But unlike us human beings, the strength doesn't taper off again as we get older. And I think that's why there's this urban myth that concrete, as it gets older, will get weaker. So concrete, instead of taking 20 or 30 years, it takes 28 days to reach what it's called its nominal strength. And that's measured in megapascals, MPa. So if you were to buy a bag of concrete, you can get normal concrete and you can get the high strength concrete. And the concrete will be nominated on the bag with its strength. Now, here's a bag here that says it's a 40 MPa concrete. There's another higher strength concrete. It says 55 MPa. That's a very strong concrete, a 55 MPa concrete. And the difference between the grades is just in the cement content. The more cement you add to it, the stronger it gets, which also makes it more expensive. So unlike human beings that tend to taper off in strength as we get older, concrete actually reaches its nominal strength at about 28 days but it keeps going on. So it actually gets incrementally stronger throughout the rest of its life. It never ever dips down. So it always flattens out, and it's almost dead flat for the rest of its life. In fact, it grows a little bit. So with this in mind, we can bust myth number one, that concrete roof tiles get weaker with age. It doesn't. It actually gets stronger. Now, another urban myth is that the concrete roof tiles get more porous. And that's the reason why you need to apply paint to the surface, so that the water doesn't get into the roof tile and the roof tile sucks up all this water. Now, the truth with concrete is that it actually gets denser with age, and the density works in parallel with its strength. As it gets stronger, it gets more dense. And density means that all the little voids are all filled up, so that the concrete is not only stronger, it is denser. So therefore, it prevents the absorption of any moisture. So moisture can't get through. Nothing gets through the concrete tile because it's so dense. And an example of how this density works is that, imagine reinforced concrete. So reinforced concrete has reinforcement steel bars embedded in the concrete. Now, if water was ever to get in past the surface layer of concrete and get into the reinforcement bar, which is steel, then it would rust. So what would happen is that all these concrete structures around you that you see that are reinforced, they're all going to grow so-called concrete cancer. It means that the reinforcement bar starts to rust and pop the concrete off. So how many bridges and buildings around you can you see that suffer from concrete cancer? It's not that often, right? And the reason for concrete cancer is that normally what happens is that you have a concrete structure that hasn't been built properly. So the cover, which is the amount of concrete between the outside and the reinforcement bar, that hasn't been installed correctly, and there are voids in there, and that's how the water get in. But if it's vibrated properly and you've got sufficient cover, then water never ever gets in. So the steel reinforcement bar is totally protected by the density of the concrete. So it's so dense that water can't get into the reinforcement bar. So that proves that concrete will never be so absorbent that the water will get through. And they say that as you soak the concrete roof tile, it gets heavier because it sucks up all this moisture. That is in fact incorrect. Now, the third major urban myth about concrete roof tiles is this growth that appears on the surface of the tile. You would imagine that if something grows on the surface, that it will have roots that go through, much like if you've got a tree, it's got roots that's going to pop your pavement. So the urban myth is that if you have a growth on top of your concrete roof tile, then that is going to cause damage to the tile. So let's have a look at this particular roof tile that's got this growth, or we call it a patina, this growth on top of the roof tile. So as we scrape it off, we'll see that it's actually growing on top of the layer of paint. It hasn't actually gone through anywhere. It's just a surface growth. You scrape it off, and once it's scraped off, the paint that's on the roof tile appears. So it hasn't even gone through the paint, let alone the roof tile. So apart from just the looks, the patina does nothing at all to the strength of the concrete roof tile. So I hope that after all this you are somewhat convinced by our attempts to bust these three major urban myths about concrete roof tiles.